Okay, hello and welcome back to Zoink TV. I'm Andrew Weir, and today I'm looking at materials on Blender 2.64. And all this includes is just the basic settings and a few different things we can use when we've actually got the materials and we can use them for to give different effects. And the settings are in a few different places, so it's always good to know where they are and so on. And that's kind of the main objective of this video. And so we've got a default scene as usual here, and firstly we're going to want to get to the materials. So if you haven't got the cube selected, and let's say you got the light selected, you're firstly going to want to select the cube, and then you want to come up here on the top right and select material, which is the little circle there with the checkered red and black material actually on the circle. And the default material is already been placed on this cube, and that will always be on the default scene. But if we set up the scene a little bit more and we add a sphere, and then we just move this on the x-axis a little bit and then on the y so that we can render this. If we add this new shape, then we get no material on it because it's a new shape that's been added. But on the default cube we've actually got material, so that's always something to look out for since the material's already on there. And what I'm actually going to do with this material is I'm just going to press this little minus to delete it, although it's perfectly fine just to continue working from. I just want to show you that the minus deletes the material, the plus adds a slot for the material, and then pressing it one more time down here on the new part actually adds the material. And we could skip a few steps there by pressing the minus and just going straight to the plus, and that'll take us straight to the material. But if we're adding more materials, we've got to actually press this plus up here. So that's how that's done, and what we're going to firstly do is come down here and look at the preview. And the preview just shows a few random shapes which you can change here on the right, and it kind of shows what it's going to look like once it's rendered. So obviously in the viewport that's how the cube's looking like, but if we render this it looks a lot better, which is how the render works. And since we're working on a cube, it's probably best to change it to a cube in the viewport, the preview viewport. And if we didn't want this, or if we had a different shape, we can always change it to just the plane, which is just the whole thing taken up by the plane, which is just a flat shape. Or this, which is kind of like a monkey, and it's the Blender character, and that shows the different ways around the eyes and so on that light will hit it. And if you've got a more complicated shape, you can always view it like this, and even though this isn't your shape, you will get a good idea of what your shape will look like. And then there's hair, and there's finally this. It's just the same thing as this, apart from with a background, and that's how it will actually look like if you change the world settings. But we'll ignore that for now. So we'll go to the cube since we're working on our cube, and what we're going to do is we're firstly going to go to this sphere here, and we're going to link them to the same material. So what we want to do is we want to click on this little circle here, which is the same as the one up there, and we'll come up with these different materials. It's got so many at the moment because I was messing around by adding a few and showing you what to do. But we actually, if we look at this material, we can name it over here, and I'm just going to name it cube, since it's the material on the cube. Now come over to this one, click there, and we can see that that's the cube. So click on that, and now they've both got the same material. And what you change to the other one will change to that one. So let's look at the cube at the moment, although it really doesn't matter which one we're selected on. What we're going to do is we're going to change the colour. So changing the colour of the material is actually in the diffuse settings, and if we click this white area here, we can see all this. And if you've used Photoshop or anything like that, you should be familiar with how these colour settings work. But if not, you can drag this around here, and that will change the colour. You can pick a colour from the scene with this little tool here, and say I want to select the lighter colour there. The whole thing changes to that colour. And if I if I want more advanced settings, or I've got some specific values to put in, we can select here, we can drag these, or we can type in 0.8 and we'll get that value in there. And then we can change the darkness of the colour, and changing it to completely black and rendering will obviously come up with not very much, but we can still see some specularity there, which is important to see, and we'll get to that in a second. And another important thing is we don't see the specularity on this cube unless the light's very strong on the shape. And the specularity appears a lot better on the shapes with more faces. That's why it's good to have the circle there. I'm just going to change this back up. I'm going to make it a red, let's say. And that's okay for now. The intensity is actually changing how intense the colour is. And it's not the same as changing the darkness, as far as I'm aware. And completely changing the intensity to 0 is completely wiping out the colour, and that's also making it black. And again, it's not the same as changing the darkness, but it pretty much does the same effect. And when you get later on through the settings, eventually it will do a different thing. And what I'm going to look at first is ramp, rather than this little pop-up menu here. And if we select ramp, we actually can render this now, and we'll see that it's kind of fading between the red, which we've already got, and a white, which is here. So it's more noticeable in that sphere actually. Where the light's more intense, it slowly fades into the darkness, into a red. And that's how that works, but what it's going to do, if we change the settings, is if we select the end here, which make sure you've got the end selected, and you know if you've got it selected because this little checkered line here becomes checkered rather than just two colours, black and white. And that's quite hard to see, but if you select different sides, both ends, you can see the difference there. But if we select that end, we can actually go to this colour here where its opaquency is pretty low, so we can change that upwards, which is change it to a black, and then we can actually just bring the lightness up, and let's make that a pink slash a purple. And when we render this now, we've got completely purple rather than red. And that's pretty much what this colour appears over the original colour, and if we change the opaquency of the colour, that's why the red shows through. So it might not appear very much now, but you can see that it's slightly different than before. But I'm going to change the opaquency back up, and then we can change this colour on the other side. Let's make that more of a blue, like that. And those two go together quite well when the light's on it. It kind of fades more into the purple. And obviously that's got a few uses, and you can get some cool materials by doing that. But again, you're going to have to think about that when you actually get into the situation. There are a few other settings in here. What we can do is we can add more colours into this mix, which can be dragged along. So I want to add maybe a completely random colour green. Let's add a green in there. And we don't see very much, so let's drag this along and drag that one along. Maybe drag this one more down there, and we can see that we've got more of an advanced kind of material in there. It's shown a lot better on that sphere. As it fades away, it changes into those colours. So I'll ignore all these other settings for now. You can kind of experiment with them just to see what they do, and they do some different stuff. And the factor actually makes it less opaque. So that's like the whole ramping colour. Instead of changing the individual opaquency, you can change the entire opaquency like that. Which, if we render this now, shows the red, but it's also got the other colours over it. And I'm just going to uncheck that now. Quite a lot of settings in there, worth messing around with. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to look at this pop-up menu, And I'm not actually going to look at the individual settings that these do because again it kind of creates a few different settings, but if we go to the next one up, we get the roughness, which if we change we can see a few differences in there. Worth experimenting with. Tune, which is one I'm going to look at the most right now, because I render this and we can see it's meant to be more of a cartoon look to the shape. And in which case, if we just change the smoothness up and the intensity just a little bit with the size, then we can get a better result over here. And as we can see, it looks more cartoon because it slowly changes into more of a better shape down here, giving off the shape, but when it's in the main area it's actually solid, and that's kind of how cartoon shading would be done. And changing those settings appropriately can give you quite a good effect, but we'll ignore that for now. We'll go up and we get this one here, again just some basic settings to change, give a different effect, and finally the top one, just a few more basic settings to change, and when we render it, it gives a different type of material to the other ones. So again, just explore and you'll get the kind of result you want, but I'm going to change it back to the original. And we're now going to move on to the specularity. I mentioned the specularity is just the light there, and that's how it will react. And if we actually change the colours here and the intensity, if we change the intensity to 0 on render, we actually see no specularity, and that's how that's affected. But let's say it's more of a shiny shape, so let's go to turning the intensity up, and we can see more shine right there, which is kind of a red shape. Maybe we want to add some kind of style to our scene. By changing the colour of the intensity to each shape, we can actually change it to purple, and now we get a purple shine on all the stuff. But if we've got different coloured lights, the different coloured light's going to shine out different colours anyway. So you've got a few different uses in there. Ramp, I'm not going to go through all the settings. It pretty much does the same thing, and as the intensity of the light changes, it's going to slowly fade into the colour of the original shape. So I'm going to change this back to white at the moment, and the quickest way to do that is to change it to black, and click off it, and then click back on, take it back up, and it should be directly in the centre. Hardness, that just changes how intense or soft the shine is, so that's just changing the size, and the intensity changes how much it is on the shape. But that's all fairly basic, so we'll close that for now. And what you'll notice is if we wanted more of a glass shape or a plastic, and we don't want it to have all these faces on it, at the moment in the materials we can't actually do anything with that. And that's because if we come over here to the left and we select our shape, such as this sphere, we can actually change the shading here, flat and smooth. It's on flat at the moment, so click smooth and you'll immediately see a much better result there on the right. It can be also done on the cube, but changing smooth shading to the cube and rendering gives kind of a weird result. So it's probably worth doing it on different shapes rather than flat shapes. Shading, I've already got a tutorial on what a mitt does. That kind of changes it into a light, and it gets rid of the shading on the shape, which gives its own effect. For the shadeless, which gets rid of the shading completely, giving that kind of effect. There's tangent shading, which is more useful for shapes like, let's say, it's got to be a metal, maybe like a Lynx can. If you had a Lynx or just a can, this kind of shading is a lot better than the other type, and with a few different specularity changes we can get a better result there. So when you're actually changing that setting, it's all done in a specularity, and you can get a better result if you just use a few different material settings. Cubic interpretation we'll ignore, it doesn't change it too much. And transparency, making the shape transparent. There's a few different settings there in which different ones you can do. Some are more advanced than others, and it's probably worth exploring, but we'll look at this one for now. The Fresnel actually changes how transparent the shape is. So render this, you can see the transparency there. Alpha changes how much is seen through and how how average the shape is like when it's actually looking through it, and how intense the different parts are. Specular, that just changes the specularity within these kind of transparency settings. And blend, that'll make it more transparent. And if we go to the mirror settings, if I just turn off transparency, the mirror settings, the basic ones would have to be turning up the reflectivity just a little bit. But if we turn the Fresnel up, that just turns it out the centre just a little bit. So get the right settings on there, just about that much. We can render this now. Without much in the scene, it's not going to appear to be very reflective, but with more in the scene, we'll get a different result. And if we change the blend up, that'll just make it either foggy or not foggy. Same with the gloss. If we turn the gloss down, that'll make it like properly not foggy, or properly foggy. And if there's a few different settings there worth exploring. Depth, we'll ignore. Just a little bit of exploring to do. Subsurface scattering we'll ignore. You can always explore that. It's just got a few different settings, as in if we change this to skin 1, and now when we render this, it takes a little bit longer, but we can see that we've got a different kind of render there, and that would be more useful for skin, which is a preset. But you get a few different settings in there, and you can always add your own settings for similar results. Strand will ignore. Options, let's see, I think we can ignore some of that. You'll just kind of have to explore with that once you get more advanced. Shadow, this is just changing all the ways that the shadow is done with the shape. And obviously if you've got a transparent shape, you might want to turn the casting of the shadow off, because even if you've got a transparent shape, it can still shine through the shape and give a proper shadow. So yeah, you might want to turn that off and change a few settings there, but we'll ignore that. And custom properties, same other thing, just does nothing until you get more advanced. Okay, I know I've gone for a while on all these settings, but I hope you're finding it useful. I've just got a few more things to add to this video, and that would be if we've got these two materials now and they're both the same, but let's say we don't want them the same anymore, we can always select on this sphere, and then we press this little plus here, and now if I want this material to be the same as that material, but I want it to be a different colour, so let's make it blue, I can change it to this purple colour, render, and they are the same material. If they were the same shape, they'd look exactly the same apart from the colour. So that's how that's done, and I think that's the final thing that I want to mention. No, the one more thing is that if we go into edit mode on the shape, we can go into face select mode, select a few different faces, select a new material, select our cube material, which is red. So we've got the red material and the blue material both in the same shape area, but at the moment none of them are applied to the shape apart from the blue one. And we can click assign. And that means that those faces which I've just clicked assign up here to, and you've got to have them selected, will then take that material. So that's made the red part there. I can render this now, and we've got the red faces there. And that's pretty much what I wanted to mention. I can't think of anything else which is too important. and I hope you found it useful. I know I went for a lot there, but now you should have a full idea of how materials work, so thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.